Awesome. Thank you all so much for coming. This is first time we've ever done an event like this. Huge thank you to LBSA and 180 for joining Venture on this event. This is, like I said in the event, this is the goal of this is just to talk about and share our experiences and learn from each other about professional development, which is this huge maze, which personally scares the hell out of me, and I know it scares a lot of other people as well. So hopefully we can all learn from each other and learn something new today. Awesome. So cool. Yes, my name is Rithik. I am a junior and I am studying electrical engineering and computer science. If y'all want to unmute and introduce yourselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Jasenia Gutierrez. I am a sophomore intended media studies major and I am the director of marketing for LBSA.
Hi everyone, my name is Juan Alva. I'm a senior studying business administration and I am VP of professional development for LBSA.
Hi everyone, my name is Samir Anamraju and I'm a senior studying industrial engineering and business and I'm the president of ESS.
Hey everyone, my name is Pedro Sanson. I'm a junior studying industrial engineering as well, and I'm the president of 180.
Hi everyone, I'm a senior. I'm Victoria, and I'm studying business and society and environment, and I'm the current director of public affairs at 180 Degrees.
Awesome, thank you. I realized I didn't give my title. I'm the external VP of Venture. Awesome, thank you so much. So for agenda, here's how we're going to be structuring a really short presentation. The main focus of this event is kind of the breakout session after, where we'll just kind of like talk and like learn through specific industry relevant experiences and techniques for doing well. So starting off with the overview, going more into kind of the resume nitty gritty, as well as cover letter after that, then going into the LinkedIn specifics, and lastly, the breakout session. Yeah, and feel free to use the chat. We have a lot of people here from these orgs, and they would love to answer any questions as well. Cool. So I will start off with the overview. I first want to start this off with a really recent quote that I've heard in a Netflix show called Becoming, and it actually really resonated. I'll just read it out loud. I think what makes you more important, what makes you more than a stat, is once you see yourself as more than a stat. Who are you? What do you care about? What brings you joy? And I hope Michelle Obama's story urges you to see the power of your story and to own that. I think that's really powerful because especially when we're recruiting, we feel like we're just a number and just a stat. And it's really important that we own up past that and realize that we do have a story, and it's really important that we share that. So I put this down to 3 parts. One, what is important? No matter what you do, all your experiences are important. It's really important that you are able to share it, and you should be able to provide the necessary context such that it shows how passionate you are about what you do. And never feel ashamed about your experiences, because all of them are important. Next, in terms of ups and downs, I think there is some false notion that everything has to be a constant positive climb. And I think that is very flawed. A lot of the times when we think about professional development, we think that everything has to go well, everything has to be perfect, but that's definitely not true. There are a lot of times that I think almost everybody in the professional world has challenges, and whether they believe that, if they do or not, they do. And it's really important to focus on not like the failure, but what you learn from them. And lastly, you're not a stat. Just reiterating the quote, your story is what makes you unique, and it's really important that you take time to think about your story and what you've learned from it and how you can really use that to leverage yourself in the professional world.
Cool. So, thank you, Rithik. So whenever we think about actually telling your story and making you kind of more than a stat, what we also are talking a lot about is building your own personal brand. So I'll just read this quote out loud and we can talk a little bit about it. So a personal brand is a widely recognized and largely uniform perception or impression of an individual based on their experience, expertise, competencies, actions, and or achievements within a community, industry, or the marketplace at large. In other words, a personal brand is how other people see you based on what they know about you. So for example, Rithik has listed out his brand. This is your Twitter, right? Nice.
Yeah.
So it's got a lot of different things about here. I also love the alliteration here too. But it kind of shows a lot of different aspects of who Rithik is. Yeah, is there anything you want to add to that, Rithik, from a branding perspective?
Yeah, I think this is something I'm still honestly working on, but it's something that I kind of want to throw in as an example. Just kind of thinking about what I care about and how I want to present myself in a very short number of words is kind of how I came up with this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when we look at the quote and we look at sort of this example, you see a lot of a one-to-one mapping, right? You see a skill set when you see developer and designer. You see a passion and interest when you see dancer. You see a philosophy when you see dreamer. And then you see credentials when you see UC Berkeley CS. So it kind of touches on a lot of different aspects of his journey and also shows who he is. And so that's something that's really powerful about this brand. Whenever we zoom out a little bit, we can go to the next slide, and we look at branding as a whole. We think of Oprah Winfrey and Elon Musk. What comes to mind when you think of Oprah? We're thinking of warmth. We're thinking of embracing stories. We're thinking of a lot of hardship that Oprah had to go through, and yet she's one of the most successful media people we know. Elon Musk, you think of somebody who's a persistent disruptor, a serial entrepreneur, who's always looking to push the envelope, and also being very eccentric too. So those are all the things that kind of come to their brand whenever we think about them. So we can move on to the next slide as well, and we can sort of talk a little bit about Rithik's and my personal brand. So we touched a little bit on Rithik's. I can share mine. So my personal branding is I'm a Swiss Army knife solving problems that matter. And for me, that kind of encapsulates who I am. My skill set is I'm good at a lot of different things, kind of like a Swiss Army knife. And I really like to solve impactful problems. So solving problems that matter is something that's really important to me as well. And so I condense that into a phrase, and also just kind of the way it's written is kind of how I talk too. So I think it kind of summarizes a lot of who I am in a statement. Yeah, I can pass it off to you, Rithik, as well.
Yeah, just to keep it brief, I really want to focus on growth. That's something which I really want to like show in my professional career. So I try to show that in my short little phrases. And I think my style is also lowercase, which is I think is a little bit different. But kind of like Samir, I try to stand out by using like these type of things. I think Swiss Army knife is something which like, you see that you're kind of like, wait, kind of take a double take. I think that's something which is interesting and makes people see your profile and like actually go through it. But yeah, Samir, is that it from your end?
Yeah, that's it. So you can kind of see a gist of everything that we do really is led and driven by our brand. Every single resume I send out, every cover letter I send out, my brand flows through it. And I think that it's really helpful to think sort of what is your distinctive brand and bring that to everything that you do. And that'll really help you position yourself for success in recruiting.
Cool, and we'll pass it off to 180 then.
Beautiful, thank you so much. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the anatomy of a resume. Essentially at the very top, and this is what you're going to brand your cover letter and kind of any writing samples that you have, but you'll have your name, email, phone number, LinkedIn. So you can see kind of my resume here on the side. At the very top, you're going to have an education section. So the mandatory things you ought to be putting are, of course, your school, expected graduation in month and year form. So instead of spring 2021, you'd put May 2021 or like December 2021. And then optional things are courses, awards, projects, publications. It definitely depends on the kind of roles that you're applying to and also the field of study. I notice a lot of CS people will put courses and projects, and then others might be putting awards like case competitions if you're going into consulting. And then the largest part of your resume is going to be the relevant experience part. It's totally okay to do kind of just a professional experience, and you can just list all of your professional experiences out. If you have specific categories of professional experiences just for readability, it's really, really nice to split those up. So these are just by no means like must-haves, but these are examples that I've seen in the past that have really worked. So work experience, that's for formal hiring, internship, part-time or full-time opportunities. Extracurricular activities or leadership is meaningful involvement in a student organization. Community involvement or volunteer experience is also another section you can have. Research, of course, and then you can also expand some of the portions of education. So if you have projects that are really meaningful and you want some bullet points to talk about what specifically you were able to do, that can also warrant its own relevant experience. And then at the very end, you'll have skills and interests. Skills can include language fluency, coding languages, software use / navigation. One really helpful thing to look at here is seeing what the job description says that you're applying to, and then just slightly altering your resume to fit exactly those descriptions. And then keep true to your interests, but maintain professionalism when you're looking at interests. I personally put Yelp reviews, the New York Times crossword, and community gardening. I feel like it's also pretty in line with my branding. So think about your brand and try to make your resume align with your brand, which it naturally will. We can go to the next slide. So building meaningful bullet points is really interesting. The framework that I've seen a lot in consulting, and I think it's just good for most other fields as well, is accomplish X as measured by Y by doing Z. And there's one bullet point I pointed out from my resume here that is, I think, a pretty good example of this. So exceeded annual outreach targets, that's what was accomplished, that's X, by 128%. So just putting a quantification there. By creating and implementing a social media marketing strategy, overseeing logistical coordination between 3 other nonprofit partners, and conducting calls to individual students. And then that's the Z. So that's a really good way to kind of make sure that you're conveying the action that you did and quantifying your impact. Sometimes it's not always possible to do that. So I think the most important things that you should be doing is first demonstrating action to show exactly what you did and also kind of demonstrate what your skill set is. And then the result showing that you are able to get things done. And quantifying is also really good. So this is specific percentages. I think this is also really helpful if you have this framework in the back of your mind to, if you're ever in a job or an internship, you can think to always have these quantification metrics while you're going through, because honestly, this framework came a little bit late in terms of how I figured out how to do resume writing. And so I had to go back to like former internships and really try to figure out how to quantify, and it would have been so much easier if I had just been keeping track the whole time. And then if you are unable to use that framework, just think of other ways, like the number of pages you were able to write, what that impact was down the line. Feel free to reconnect with your old boss to see like what your work was put to use for. And we can go to the next slide. So wrapping up the basics for format, just make sure that you use a consistent design, font, sizing, and spacing. Again, a super great place to show off your personal brand. It also depends on the type of job that you go for. So sometimes you see, especially for like design jobs, you're seeing more creative resumes. Just make sure it's consistent. One thing that was interesting, I feel like the consulting community loves Garamond and certain serif fonts. So kind of like Times New Roman, those like fancier fonts that I guess you use for like college writing. But then for policy, I was in Cal in the Capitol my freshman year, and they told us very strictly to use sans serif fonts, which are like Lato and Calibri and Arial. So there are some industry specific standards, but as long as it's consistent, I think it's fine either way. Of course, try to use black or dark text to ensure readability, and then always format as a PDF unless otherwise specified. Sometimes people prefer Word. Content, include your contact information and email at the top always. LinkedIn and address are optional. I've heard address is phasing out just for security purposes, but I think so long as you are being secure with it, just make sure all of your information on your resume is fine to be circulated just in case. And then you don't have to include objective statements, and then don't include references unless otherwise specified. Usually that is further down the line in most interview processes I've seen. And then length, keep your resume to a single page. One thing that has come up is what is the difference between a resume and a CV? A CV stands for curriculum vitae, and a resume is essentially a summary of your skills and work experience, just a really quick snapshot. But a CV details the entirety of your academic and professional career with no page limit. It's really easy to find examples online because most professors have one. So you could literally look up your favorite professor and curriculum vitae, and it's probably uploaded there. We can go on to the next slide.
Yeah, now we'll be jumping into cover letters. So I think there's a little bit more openness in regard to how you actually choose to write a cover letter. And we just wanted to point out a few of like the basic structures and frameworks that could be used and a few of the contents that could be included. And I think in general, the idea really is for you to kind of unite the brand that we had discussed earlier with a few of the professional experiences you had, and wrap that up nicely and frame it towards like how you will be a value add to the company or firm or organization that you are applying to. And so in regard to the structure itself, the most important thing at first is starting really with like developing your personal brand. And so that is including general information as to your education, career aspirations, and who you really are. And I think sometimes people can be a little bit brief with that aspect of a cover letter. I think that first paragraph should really attempt to hook the person who's reading it to be interested and like keep going within your cover letter. I've noticed a lot of like rather generic openings, which can be a little bit limiting in that sense, I'd say. And then once you do establish yourself, I think the second important portion is really connecting you and the company or firm for which you're recruiting. And I think that brings in like how your personal interests relate to that company. And then you want to drive that by talking about your value add. And so I would say that that would come more so from like your experiences and outlining a few of like the different opportunities you've had or in general that would add value to that company. And then you summarize those key points and express gratitude towards the end of your cover letter. I think this is like a pretty generic way to look at it. And a lot of different people have different approaches. And so to the right, we just included a quick potential that we've identified. This definitely doesn't necessarily strictly follow the structure we mentioned earlier, but it does show how you're quickly introducing yourself. You're being like right to the point as to why this consulting firm should think about hiring you. And then it outlines a lot of different qualities that you see that describe yourself. And then you summarize everything towards the end. I think in general, though, I would say that cover letters are a little bit more of like a case-by-case basis. It's a little bit harder to generalize compared to like a resume, for instance. But and hopefully the breakout rooms towards the end will be the most helpful in this regard. But for now, I think this is a general rule of thumb, and making sure that other people are reading your cover letter is definitely a good way as well to just like check it over and make sure that your thoughts are flowing clearly and you're being thorough. Yeah. Now I think LBSA, yes.
Thank you so much, Pedro. And you know, kind of before we jump into the first slide here, for LinkedIn, when we think of LinkedIn, a lot of people usually think that it's going to be mirroring your resume, but it's really not. LinkedIn is another way to really promote your story. It's a way for you to kind of put a face to who you are and really showcase like why you're unique from everyone else. And that's kind of what we want to dive into. So next slide, please. And Jasenia is gonna get started.
All right, so the first question we want you all to consider is, who are you? You know, we're all Berkeley students, we're all hardworking young professionals, but what is it that makes you different from all the other candidates that are applying to the same positions, internships, jobs? So something to consider is, what is your background? What are your passions, your skills, identity, struggles? And how are you promoting this? So I'll just let that sink in for a bit. But next slide, please. So another question we want you to consider is, what do you want out of, you know, having a LinkedIn profile? Is it the connections, being able to connect with professionals and setting up coffee chats? Is it the multi-channel promotions purposes? Do you want engagement or job offers? And today we're going to be jumping into how you could leverage LinkedIn in order to get job offers. Next slide. And the three key elements that are key to your LinkedIn profile are your headline, your bio, and experiences. And Juan will be teaching you more about that. So I'll pass it on to Juan.
Thank you, Jasenia. Next slide, please. So I guess we want to kind of dive deep into the headline first. The headline is the first thing you see when you look at someone's picture. The first thing you see is a picture, which is, I think, really important for everyone to have, like a nice, like professional picture that kind of ties to your brand, right? So I've seen a lot of people who maybe are into design and they don't have, you know, the typical like suit, you know, picture. They might have like more of a designer, more, you know, like artsy. And that's, you know, totally fine. It's just, you have to decide what your brand is. And same goes for cover letter. But the next thing that we look at is the headline. And so your headline has to really hit home in these different variables. First, it has to be scannable. So I have to be able to read through this and kind of get the keywords from it, right? these headlines also have to show qualifications. So don't be afraid to use names, right? Like if you know a certain, like software, like the second example that was more geared towards CS, or if, in the first example, like Google and YouTube and Haas, these are all names that are going to catch on to people. Also, I think, especially since we're students right now, recruiters want to look at what specific, college you go to, as well as what year you're in, right? So if you're specifically looking for job offers and recruiters to reach out to you, you want to have all this information for them to like quickly, get to scan your profile and click on it. Industry has to be easily identifiable. It has to be enticing. And if you maybe don't want a job offer or something else, you can have a call to action. So you can be like, check something else out, or, click on this, or I don't know. So there's like a lot of different things you can add on your headline. But if to catch someone's attention, it has to be scannable. So next slide, please. Next is your bio. And so on the left here, if you want to take a read, that's my bio, what I have on LinkedIn. It has worked for me personally. I've had, quite a few recruiters in tech like reach out to me and offered me, like to apply to these jobs. So it's worked really well. But I have, extensively tried to research and constantly improve, and looked at a lot of different people. But I think really your bio has to capture why you are unique. You are first and unique in what you do. It has to be scannable again, right? So like if you put a big, large paragraph, like why would anyone want to take time out of their day to read a big paragraph, right? So you have to make all your content digestible, especially for if it's a recruiter who, has like a list of like, hundreds of people that they go through every single day. Like the format, it's not only like the content, but it also has to be the format. So I like to add bullet points on mine that just kind of showcase little things and kind of entice you to read more. Stories are much more impactful and more memorable for people. And this is something that I have kind of learned consistently, especially this year in my classes. It's also really important to have a call to action at the end. So my call to action is to check out my YouTube channel, but a lot of different people have their emails, and you can just put your email there so people can email you. But really it's up to you what you want people to do once they read that bio. It showcases your skills, your interests, your experience, and you have to find a good balance between when to talk about the past, the present, and the future. And lastly, I have understand. So who do you want to read this? Do you want a recruiter to read this? Do you want a client to read this? You want your classmates to read it? And how does that make them feel? Right? So if you have something that's really big and chunky and it's wordy, like it, most likely people are just going to skim over and not really think much. But if you make it in a way that's digestible and interesting, that's the way to go. So next slide. And lastly, we have experiences. So experiences is a little bit more straightforward than your bio and headline. Basically, for me, I like to put my bullet points right now as a student. But I know that once I enter the workforce next year, I'm going to write short stories about each experience to show kind of how I got to, where I'm going to be working at. Club experiences should go into the experiences tab until you have enough experience. So I had all of my clubs, like LBSA in my experiences tab up until last year, which is when I had, enough like internships and experience that I really wanted to showcase. And then I moved those club experiences into volunteering. And that's kind of what I've seen a lot of people do who are already in the workforce, that they, move all their club experiences to volunteering and just keep strictly like their internships and their jobs in the experiences section. Lastly, there's other things in the experiences section, asking recommendations for your bosses. I think that's something incredibly valuable. If you go an internship, and you finish it, ask them, can you write me a LinkedIn recommendation? It's one paragraph and it's going to help, make you seem like a lot more credible. And also add images to your work. So in my internship experience at Warner Brothers, I added, pictures of the movies that I worked in. And that's, I think, a lot more impactful. And as I said, sharing stories, sharing images, having like kind of an image to the to the experience is much more impactful, much more memorable. And so I think this is, great, kind of things you can consider. And I hope that you're able to apply these to your personal LinkedIn. So that's it for me, and we can go to the next slide. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Yeah, we are, wow, perfect on time. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.